I'm a bit late to the party, but this is the M1 MacBook Air, and we're going to compare this against the 2019 MacBook Air, the 2017 MacBook Pro, and my 2020, or I guess 2017 iMac Pro. So let's see how this is. So unboxing the laptop, we have the laptop in gold here, and then the box is pretty minimalistic. So we have the USB Type-C cable here, we have a documentation, and this is the charger. So it's a Type-C charger. Now in here, we have our cool gold Apple stickers to show off on our cars that we have an Apple product. Apple hasn't really changed the design at all. We have two Thunderbolt 3 ports on the left side, and on the right side we have a headphone jack. The design is basically the same as the previous generation MacBook Air. There are a few different keys here on the F function keys, but besides that, everything else is basically the same as before. You wouldn't really be able to tell that you have a new MacBook looking at them side by side. The display is a Retina display 2560 by 1600 with P3 color gamut support, 400 nit brightness, and True Tone display technology. Now, the viewing angles are pretty good, but it does have some reflection since it's a glossy display. Surprisingly, the sound for a 13-inch ultralight laptop, it's really good. Now, interestingly, the 2019 MacBook actually sounds better on the same exact track. It has more bass and more treble. However, I guess this one is more balanced, so there's less bass and less treble, and it's kind of more of a flat response, where this one has a little bit more dynamic audio. But overall, for a 13-inch laptop, this is really good, and it sounds better than some gaming laptops I've tested. So great job, Apple, on the audio. The M1 MacBook Air is very responsive and starts up really fast as well. Surprisingly, it beat both of the other high-end computers that I have. The MacBook Air on the left is an exception for some reason, and when you wake it up from sleep, it's also instant, which is really nice. Now, one of the coolest features, I think, on the M1 is being able to run iPhone and iPad apps. Now, here as you can see, we're running an iPhone app, and we can also change the orientation on this. And we can also go full screen. So this, I believe, wasn't available in the original release of macOS Big Sur. So that's why I kind of waited to do this. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but it's kind of blurry on the Mac because it's being upscaled. In terms of the webcam, we're still using a 720p FaceTime HD camera. 2020. So sad. Well, it's 2021 now, but yeah. Moving on to benchmarks, the SSD is very fast, as you can see here. And running a real-world test, rendering one of my videos at 4K 30fps, 6 minutes and 27 seconds in Final Cut Pro, the M1 MacBook Air actually beat my 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro. Now, of course, it can't match up to the iMac Pro, which has a 10-core CPU, but this is still very impressive. Looking at Cinebench R23, the M1 MacBook Air beats basically all the other laptops besides the iMac Pro. Even if we run the benchmark in Rosetta mode, it's still faster than the 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro. In Geekbench 5, the CPU test shows the same story. The M1 MacBook Air beats everything besides the iMac Pro natively, and even in Rosetta, it still beats everything natively besides the iMac Pro. In multi-core, in single-threaded, it's the best. My M1 MacBook Air has the 7-core GPU, not the 8-core. But still, it's performing really well. It's keeping up with the Radeon Pro 560, if not beating it in the Metal test. Obviously, the Vega 56 in my iMac Pro is much faster than these, but the 7-core GPU is still very impressive where it stands. Now to look at thermals, well, it's the same story as always. All the laptops are in the high 90s, they're all basically thermal throttling, but to be fair to the MacBook Air M1, it does not have a fan, so if it had a fan, I have no doubt that it would run much cooler. The iMac Pro is the only one that did not thermal throttle in the test, so there's that. One of my favorite things about these laptops is the battery life. The M1 MacBook Air is the best laptop I've tested in the battery life department. The MacBook Pro M1 is slightly better, but this is still really good. This is with my settings, with the brightness cranked up, and me actually doing stuff on the laptop. Very impressive. I can actually go a few days without charging this laptop if I use it for like 5 hours a day, which was really impressive and super useful. Let's talk about a few limitations. First of all, you cannot natively run Windows on this computer. So if you really need Windows, you might want to take a look at Intel-based Macs while you still can. However, I'm pretty sure in the future we'll get virtualization that supports Windows, but it will be virtualization, it won't be native. And who knows, maybe Microsoft will allow people like us to license ARM Windows, so we'll see how that goes. One thing I want to mention is plugins and stuff for things like Final Cut and Logic. They all work if you use Rosetta 2. So if you use Rosetta 2, you don't need to wait for manufacturers to update their stuff for Apple Silicon, which is really cool. The M1 MacBook Air is great, and at $899 with student discount, or less than $999 sometimes on Amazon, so check the link below, it's a great buy. It's silent, and it gets the job done really well. Now, if you need a laptop that doesn't thermal throttle for work, I recommend the 13-inch MacBook Pro. It is more expensive and harder to justify, especially the price difference, but if you need something that constantly keeps performance, the MacBook Air is there. Now, this is Apple's first generation M1 chip. The M2 or whatever the next generation comes out is going to be better in every way possible, of course. And as you can see, the chassis is still exactly the same. All of Apple's new products with the M1 are exactly the same. If you're looking for a refresh and you can wait, I would wait. The iMac is supposed to come out next, so we'll see how that goes. Overall, the battery life on this is amazing. I can only imagine how the MacBook Pro is, but I can definitely recommend this machine. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.